On the 14th of December, 2019, somebody took a photograph of two boys at a school concert. They were smiling, holding awards. 13-year-old Alec had just been recognized for piano and violin. 11-year-old Tyler for piano and guitar. They looked like exactly what they were, two kids having a great night. Nobody in that auditorium knew they were looking at the last photographs that would ever be taken of them. Nobody knew that in a matter of days, both of those boys would be dead, killed inside their own home, by the one person in the world who was supposed to keep them safe. Welcome to True Crime Traces, and today we are going deep into one of the most disturbing family murder cases in recent American history, the story of Anthony and Megan Tote, and their three children, 13-year-old Alexander, 11-year-old Tyler, and 4-year-old Zoe. This is a case about financial ruin, about control, about the terrifying gap between how a family appears to the world and what is actually happening behind closed doors. Stay with me, because this story does not let go. If what you just heard already sent a chill down your spine, you are in the right place. Like this video, subscribe to True Crime Traces, and hit that notification bell right now, because every single week, we go inside the cases that the world cannot afford to forget. Now let's get into it. It was the 13th of January, 2020. 9:30 in the morning. Celebration, Florida, a master-planned community built to look like something out of a storybook. Wide streets, immaculate lawns, houses painted in warm pastels. The kind of neighborhood where you wave to your neighbors, where children ride bikes after school, where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But on that particular morning, federal agents from the United States Department of Health and Human Services arrived alongside deputies from the Osceola County Sheriff's Office. They weren't there to admire the neighborhood. They were there for one man, Anthony Tote. 44 years old. A licensed physical therapist. A youth soccer coach. A husband and a father of 3. To everyone who knew him, he was one of the good ones. They had a warrant for his arrest on healthcare fraud charges tied to his physical therapy practice in Connecticut. Investigators had been building this case since April of 2019. Since the 9th of January, they had been trying to make contact with Anthony, calling, showing up, getting nothing. So on this morning, agents had been conducting surveillance outside the house for several hours, watching, waiting. And then, there he was. Anthony Tote stepped out onto the front porch. Before the agents could move in to take him into custody, he turned around and went back inside. But one agent noticed something about the way he moved. Something deeply wrong. He appeared to be struggling with each step. Almost convulsing. His body moving in a way that made no sense for a man simply walking through his own front door. Agent Melissa O'Neill knocked. No answer. They opened the door. And the smell hit them. From somewhere above, they could hear mumbling. They looked up toward the top of the staircase, and there he was, Anthony Tote, standing at the top of the stairs in his underwear and a t-shirt, staring down at them. Mumbling. Disoriented. Barely present. Agent O'Neill later said it took him a long time to get down those stairs. He kept telling them not to touch him. Said he would fall. When he finally reached the bottom, they asked him the most ordinary question in the world. Where is your wife? Where are your children? He said Megan was upstairs sleeping. He called out her name. As for the kids, he wasn't sure. He thought maybe they had gone to a sleepover the night before. Agents O'Neill and Wynn went upstairs to find them. The master bedroom door was open. They stepped inside. They saw feet. Then the outline of another body. They had found Megan Tote. And beside her, her sons. 13-year-old Alexander, known to everyone as Alec. And 11-year-old Tyler. There was no sign of 4-year-old Zoe. They searched the rest of the house. They called her name. Nothing. And so they went back to the master bedroom and looked again, more carefully this time. She was so small. A little blanket at the foot of the bed. Zoe had been there the entire time. Her tiny body in such an advanced state of decomposition that the agents had walked right past her without seeing her at all. Also dead in that room was the family dog, a dog named Breezy. Investigators would later describe the condition of the remains as black as leather. The family had been lying there for weeks. Anthony Tote was taken into custody. The scene was sealed. And what had begun as a routine fraud investigation became, in a single horrifying moment, a quadruple homicide. To understand the full weight of what was lost in that house, you need to know who this family was, or at least, who the world believed them to be. Anthony and Megan had been high school sweethearts. They had grown up together, fallen in love young, and built an entire life side by side. Together they ran family physical therapy in Colchester and East Hampton, Connecticut, a practice they had owned since 2008. Megan was a certified yoga instructor with a master's degree in physical therapy. She worked in the practice alongside Anthony. Those who knew her described her with a warmth that was impossible to miss. Just the sweetest person. A loving and devoted mother. Kind, generous, warm. Someone who made every room feel a little brighter just by being in it. Anthony, meanwhile, was described as an involved and active father. He coached youth soccer on weekends. He knew the names of his patients' children, asked after their families, gave parenting tips in between therapy sessions. One patient said Anthony had been treating him since high school. He told reporters that Anthony always talked about his kids and his family, and that right before Thanksgiving of 2019, something had seemed off. He was quieter than usual. On his phone a lot. That was very unlike him, the patient said. Very unlike him. Their 3 children were exactly what you would hope children raised in a loving home would be. Alec and Tyler loved to read. They loved music with a passion. On the 14th of December, 2019, just weeks before their bodies would be discovered, both boys performed at a holiday concert at their school. Alec received an award for piano and violin. Tyler for piano and guitar. Someone took photographs of them that evening. 2 boys grinning broadly, holding their awards, completely alive, completely themselves. Those photographs were the last ones ever taken of them. 4-year-old Zoe was curious and energetic. A total princess, her great-aunt said. The kind of child who fills a house with noise and light and the particular chaos that only a 4-year-old can create. On the surface, this was a happy family. A successful family. A family that had everything going for them. But beneath the surface, everything was quietly falling apart. The Tote family had relocated from Colchester, Connecticut to Celebration, Florida, though exactly when remains unclear. Anthony had continued traveling back and forth to Connecticut during the week, still seeing patients, still trying to hold the business together. But the business could not be held together. Not anymore. Court records told a story of a man drowning in debt. Liens, legal claims giving creditors the right to hold possession of property until debts are repaid, had been placed on a condominium the family owned in Celebration, just blocks from their rental home on Reserve Place. On December 22, their landlord had filed an eviction notice for more than $5,000 in unpaid rent. That notice was formally served on December 26. 4 days after Christmas. And then there were the fraud allegations. Federal investigators had built a detailed case against Anthony, documented in an affidavit filed with the United States District Court of Connecticut. According to investigators, Anthony had run a billing scheme that defrauded insurance companies of approximately $130,000, submitting claims for physical therapy services that were never performed. The alleged fraud had begun as early as 2015 and continued through the middle of 2019. One family told investigators their insurance provider had been billed for 172 hours of physical therapy sessions they had never attended. Medicaid records showed it had paid Anthony more than $17,000 for those phantom appointments. The same records showed Medicaid had paid out more than $20,000 for Saturday appointments, despite the fact that the practice was not open on Saturdays. Between 2015 and 2018, the business had borrowed money from 20 different lenders. In a single month, the practice took out nearly $100,000 in short-term loans. Employees reported that their paychecks had bounced, or stopped coming altogether. When federal agents questioned Anthony, he initially denied everything. Then he admitted to padding his billing claims. When asked if he had been living beyond his means, his answer was chilling in its casualness. "That's the best way to put it," he said. In New York, he owed another $99,000 to creditors across two separate judgments issued in 2019. He had taken out several high-interest loans to keep the family's lifestyle going. His total debts were estimated at approximately $200,000. And through all of it, Megan apparently had no idea. Anthony later told federal agents that Megan was entirely unaware of what was happening. That he had been carrying it all alone, hiding it, managing it, or failing to manage it, all while maintaining the appearance of a thriving family man. He had told Megan's relatives that the family was going on holiday and would be out of contact for a while. Relatives received messages saying the whole family was sick. Christmas came and went with no word from Megan. When neighbors messaged her after seeing the eviction notice on the front door, she replied with only a few words. Anthony's sister contacted investigators in December and then again in January, asking for a welfare check. Deputies went to the house on December 29. They knocked. No answer. The sheriff said he found nothing suspicious. It wasn't unusual for the family to travel, he noted, given their business in Connecticut. The family was officially reported missing on January 6, 2020. Friends and family created a Facebook group, looking for the Tote family. Messages poured in from the Colchester community. Worried sick and praying for their safe return. People who had known Anthony and Megan for years, who had watched their boys play soccer and perform at school concerts, who had no way of knowing that those boys were already gone. When Anthony failed to make contact with federal investigators despite promising to cooperate, the decision was made to arrest him. And so on January 13, they went to the house on Reserve Place. And they found what they found. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with the words "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this story, because what comes next is even harder to hear. After his arrest, Anthony was taken to hospital. Investigators discovered he had taken Benadryl, a common antihistamine containing the drug diphenhydramine. Once he was medically cleared, he was transferred to the county jail. The Orange County medical examiner determined that Megan, Alec, and Tyler had been drugged with Benadryl and then stabbed. The stab wounds on both boys had been inflicted post-mortem, after they were already dead. Alec, Tyler, and Zoe had also been strangled or suffocated. The bodies had been in such an advanced state of decomposition that no blood was available for toxicology testing. Investigators instead tested liver tissue, brain matter, chest fluid, and hair samples. There were signs that one of the boys had fought back. He had a long, visible scratch running down his neck. His hands were covered in blisters and cuts, the marks of someone who had struggled with everything he had. Alec had been found holding rosary beads. When detectives sat down with Anthony Tote, what he told them was unlike almost anything they had ever heard in an interrogation room. He said that Megan had become fixated on the concept of reincarnation. That the two of them had spent hours, days, researching together, watching videos, reading, convincing themselves that the end of the world was coming. An apocalyptic event, he called it. He said they had come to believe that the world was going to collapse, that families would be separated and enslaved, and that the only path to salvation, the only way to keep their family together, was to die together. He said Megan had been battling Lyme disease for years. That she had suffered through multiple miscarriages. That the idea of a peaceful death, a transcendent transition, an everlasting life free from pain and sorrow and heartbreak, that it had appealed to her deeply. And that it had appealed to him too. He told investigators that he and Megan had spoken to their children about death. About dying. He claimed the children had been asked, "What would you do if Mommy died? What would you feel if Daddy died?" And he said their children had answered in the same way every time. "We don't want you to die. We want to die with you." He described how Megan had made a pudding pie, a Jell-O pie, laced with cough medicine. It hadn't worked. So they kept researching. Eventually, they settled on Benadryl. The safest way to put them to sleep, he said. What he described next was the killing of his own children, and his account was so methodical, so precise, so devoid of any recognizable human emotion, that the detectives questioning him were visibly shaken. Zoe was first. He said it took him 2 to 3 hours sitting with her before he could bring himself to act. He said the thought of her salvation kept him going. He pressed a pillow over her face. She fought for a couple of minutes. He held it there for 10 to 15 minutes. Then Alec. Anthony stabbed his eldest son, and when Alec kept moving, kept fighting, kept rolling, he covered his nose and mouth with his hand until Alec finally stopped. Megan had walked out of the room partway through. She could not watch. Tyler was next. Megan stood outside the door doing meditations while Anthony was inside. Tyler died the same way. The stab wounds, Anthony explained, had come afterward. He had needed a knife, he said. He found one after it was already over. Then Megan. He said she had told him, "If you love me, you can do this. I want to be with my babies." He gave her more Benadryl. She had also stabbed herself in the abdomen, he said. When that didn't kill her, he smothered her with a pillow. After killing all 4 of them, he moved their bodies to the master bedroom. He told detectives he had wanted to join them. That was where he wanted to be, on the other side, with his family. But he did not join them. Instead, in the days and weeks that followed, Anthony Tote left the house to buy alcohol. He went to get fast food. He checked the mail. He sat in that house with the decomposing bodies of his wife and 3 children, and he sent text messages from their phones to family and friends, making it appear that Megan and the kids were still alive. He did this to buy time. To keep people from asking questions. He lived with their bodies for weeks. When detectives pressed him on why he was still alive, why, if this was truly a mutual death pact, he was the only one who had survived, he struggled to give a clear answer. He said he had chickened out. He said he couldn't bring himself to go through with it. He said he had wanted to but couldn't. The detectives listening to him said plainly, "There are things here I don't believe." And they were right not to believe them. But the account Anthony gave in that interrogation room, recorded, detailed, delivered in his own voice, would not remain the story he stuck to. As the weeks passed and the reality of what was coming set in, Anthony Tote changed his story. Completely. He now told investigators that he had come home to find Megan had already killed the children. That he had confronted her, and she had stabbed herself in the stomach and died right in front of him. That he had been paralyzed by grief and shock and had not called the police. That the reason he had originally confessed to the killings was to protect Megan, to shield her reputation, to take the blame so the mother of his children would not be remembered as a murderer. He entered a plea of not guilty. In recorded jail phone calls, he told his sister he hadn't even been present when his family was killed. He implied that Megan had been the real killer all along, and suggested it hadn't been her first attempt. He criticized the media coverage. He announced he was going to file lawsuits. He said he planned to start a non-profit in memory of his family. He filed a federal lawsuit for $9.9 million against his jail after a letter he had written to his father was obtained by the Orlando Sentinel through a public records request. The letter had been scanned by prison officials as part of standard procedure before being sent out. In it, Anthony was still blaming Megan, describing her giving the family drugged food, separating them, and then killing each child one by one. At news of this, "I ran into the bathroom and puked," he wrote. "I was weak. There was something else about Anthony Tote's history that no one could ignore. When Anthony was 4 years old, the same age as his daughter Zoe when she died, his father Robert had arranged for a 19-year-old young man with learning disabilities to murder Anthony's mother, Loretta. The shooter broke into the family home one night. Anthony woke up at the sound. He walked into his mother's room and either saw or heard the gun go off. Loretta survived. She lost her left eye. But she survived. The district attorney who prosecuted the case remembered it clearly decades later. He noted that whoever had carried young Anthony back to his bedroom that night, gently picking him up, putting him back to bed, had almost certainly been the shooter himself. Paid to kill his mother. Carrying him back to his room in the dark. Robert Todt served approximately 10 years in prison. Loretta stood by him through the trial before eventually accepting the truth, divorcing him, and raising her children in Connecticut. The man now charged with murdering his own family had been just 4 years old when he witnessed the attempted murder of his mother. The same age as the daughter he smothered with a pillow. Robert Todt, watching the trial from home, said the verdict was very difficult to take. He reflected on what his son had been exposed to that night. He saw the gun, he saw the man, he saw everything, Robert said. He acknowledged that he had stepped away from his role as a father after his conviction. He said the two of them were now in regular contact and that he didn't believe Anthony had received a fair trial. On April 11, 2022, the murder trial of Anthony Tote began. The prosecution announced they would not be seeking the death penalty. Before the trial got underway, the defense moved to suppress all 3 of Anthony's confessions. One was excluded. Investigators had failed to properly advise him of his Miranda rights before the first interview. The other 2 were admitted. The judge also ruled that the defense could not reference Anthony's mental health history, any suicidal ideation, or previous Baker Act proceedings, though his medications at the time of the confessions could be discussed. In opening statements, the prosecution told the jury this case was about one thing: control. Anthony Tote had controlled how his family lived. He had controlled how they died. The chief medical examiner testified that the victims had died as a result of homicidal violence combined with toxic levels of diphenhydramine. She could not rule out suffocation, but acknowledged that the advanced state of decomposition limited what could be definitively determined. The defense leaned into that uncertainty, arguing that the condition of the bodies meant the exact cause and manner of each death could not be proven beyond reasonable doubt. The prosecution had a response to that too. They told the jury that Anthony had deliberately left the bodies to decay, that he had manufactured the very doubt his defense was now exploiting. And then Anthony Tote did something that many defendants in murder cases never do. He took the stand. "It has been 2 years since I've been able to tell my story," he said. He told the jury his wife had killed their children. That she had died in front of him. That the taped confession was a fabrication, told to protect Megan's memory. He said he had fallen down the stairs at some point and hit his head, resulting in a fracture to his neck. He claimed the last thing he remembered before waking up in jail was the fall. The prosecution played the interrogation tape. Jurors heard Anthony's own voice, describing in detail how he had entered each child's room. How he had held pillows over their faces. How long it had taken. Under cross-examination, he became combative. Evasive. At one point he interrupted the prosecutor mid-question to tell her she couldn't ask him things that way. In closing arguments, prosecutors returned to their theme. Control. They reminded the jury that the way Anthony had described moving through that house, room by room, child by child, deliberate and methodical, was entirely consistent with what the physical evidence showed. The only real inconsistency in his original account had been the order in which the children were killed. The jury deliberated. At one point they reported being deadlocked. The judge delivered an Allen charge, an instruction encouraging jurors to continue deliberating and to honestly reconsider their positions. It is sometimes called a dynamite charge. It is used when a jury cannot agree. This time, it worked. On April 14, 2022, the jury came back. Guilty. First-degree murder, Megan Todt. Guilty. First-degree murder, Alexander Tote. Guilty. First-degree murder, Tyler Todt. Guilty. First-degree murder, Zoe Tote. Guilty. Cruelty to animals. Anthony Tote shook his head. He spoke after the verdict, insisting again that he had not done this. That his children and his wife were everything to him. That he hadn't been there. That he didn't remember. That he loved them. The judge looked at him and said, "The jury has unanimously determined that you, Anthony John Tote, are a destroyer of worlds." He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on each of the 4 murder counts, to be served consecutively. 1 additional year for cruelty to animals. He will never leave prison. At the sentencing, Megan's aunt and godmother, the woman who had also been godmother to all 3 children, stood up and spoke. She talked about the girlfriend days she and Megan used to have. Days out for lunch, for shoes, for laughter. She described how Anthony would call Megan repeatedly during those outings, unable to go an hour without knowing exactly where she was and what she was doing, until Cynthia herself would pick up the phone and tell him to stop. She talked about how the children in the community of Celebration had been affected, how children had gone to their fathers and asked, "Are you going to kill me someday? Do you think you might kill me?" She said Anthony had crushed her entire family. That her parents missed Megan and the kids every single day. That all she had left were photographs and memories she carried in her heart. A family home is supposed to be a place of safety. The one place in the world where the danger stays outside. Where you close the door at night and you know, that the people inside are protected. For Megan, for Alec, for Tyler, for Zoe, and for Breezy, the danger was already inside. It had always been inside. And they never knew. They were not living in the shadow of their father's failures. They didn't know about the mounting debt, the fraudulent claims, the eviction notices, the loans, the lies. They were just living. Reading books. Playing instruments. Growing up. Being a family. Megan stood by the man she had loved since high school through things she didn't even know were happening. She trusted him. Completely. And Anthony's attempt, even after her death, even from a jail cell, to recast her as the killer, to take the only thing she had left and corrupt it, is perhaps the most revealing thing about who he truly was. Megan Tote. Alexander Tote. Tyler Tote. Zoe Tote. They deserved so much more than what happened to them. They deserved the ordinary, joyful, unremarkable life they were living. And the loss of that, the loss of everything they were and everything they were going to become, is what makes this case impossible to let go of. Anthony Tote filed an appeal to the 5th District Court in 2022. The status of that appeal remains ongoing. But 4 verdicts have already been delivered by 12 people who heard every piece of evidence and made their decision. And in a house in Celebration, Florida, in a neighborhood built to look like a dream, they found only a nightmare. If this case has stayed with you, and I believe it will, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Subscribe to True Crime Traces if you haven't already, and leave a comment telling us, what do you think was truly driving Anthony Tote, the debt, the control, or something darker that began the night a 4-year-old boy walked into his mother's room and heard a gunshot in the dark? Every comment gets read. Every name in this story deserves to be remembered. Thank you for watching True Crime Traces. We'll see you in the next case.